Welcome to the Mind Sensei podcast. I'm your host, Peter Taz, and I'll be taking you on a journey to the world of martial arts and introduce listeners to some of the most inspiring and knowledgeable practitioners from around the world. Whether you're a seasoned martial artist or a curious beginner, or just enjoy hearing a great story, the Mind Sensei podcast Down Under has something for everyone. So tune in, sit back, and let us take you on a journey through the world in martial arts. So welcome to the Mind Sensei podcast. Today we're joined by Mr. Donnie Jeffcoat, a seasoned practitioner of Kempo and head instructor and owner of the Shaolin American Self-Defense Academy in North Hollywood. Mr. Jeffcoat has been teaching Kempo since 2006, holds a sixth-degree black belt title, professor in American Kempo, and began his martial arts journey training in the Fred Villari Kempo system back in 1985, later expanding his study to Shaolin Kempo under Professor Charles Matera, United Studios of Self-Defense. Over the years, he continued to develop his expertise in American Kempo and various fighting arts. From his early years in martial arts beginnings to working as an actor, he brings a wealth of experience and clear passion for teaching. It's a privilege to have him with us today. Join me in welcoming Mr. Donnie Jeffcoat to the Mind Sensei podcast. Welcome, sir, to the Mind Sensei podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, so we start at the beginning. Give us a story on what got you inspired to start practicing and how did you choose your particular style?
Like I said, I think in the 80s, one of the biggest influences for most kids starting at such a young age is movies, and watching action movies and martial arts films. And of course, you had the Kung Fu series and such. So I was just always interested. I mean, I was the kid that would go into my dad's tool set in the garage, find some duct tape and some nails and make my own shurikens and take, being from the country, from the South. I was born in Mississippi, then went to Alabama, then Oklahoma. I moved to Southern California in 1983, 84 when I was in third grade. So I spent a lot of time in my early years in the woods. And of course, knives and hunting, fishing, all that stuff were part of my upbringing. So I would whittle my own ninja swords out of a piece of wood. And, I had my own mask that I created from just materials from black shirts my mom would give me. I was just, very, very much into that whole storyline. So I would say like guys like Sho Kosugi, I always mention him. Just because his Revenge of the Ninja, Return of the Ninja movies, I would watch over and over and over and over again. And of course, back then you had like Kung Fu Magazine. At the back of these magazines, you had this catalog. You had all the training claw, the climbing claws and the rope hooks and the shurikens and all that. And I had a chance to travel to Japan when I was about 11, 12 years old. My sister was working for Tokyo Disneyland at the time. And my mom and I flew out for a couple weeks to visit. And I remember just spending majority of the time looking for Japanese weapons. I brought back that sword that's up in my office here and a bunch of shurikens and stuff. So it's just, a kid being a kid. When I moved from Oklahoma, I had a very thick Southern accent coming into a California, environment with a totally different accent. I think that kind of the first year of my third grade to fourth grade years, bullies were starting to kind of push around on me and such. I was the new kid on the block. And that's kind of, I think, what spurred my parents to say, let's get you into some self-defense training. And of course I was all game about that. And, as a kid, I'm a huge advocate. I have a 4-year-old daughter that's already starting training here. She's obviously grew up here since she's a little baby, but now she's doing private lessons with me every week, and eventually I'll get her in a group class. And I think it's just a big character development thing. As you know, you have a children's program. It's goes far past the punches and the kicks and the art of self-defense. I mean, it's really about building the confidence and character and stuff. So I got involved and I loved it. It was definitely an addiction for me as a kid, a very healthy one. And I maintained that love my whole life. It was always a part of me. I started around the same year as I started acting. And of course, having martial arts on my resume, the agent really liked. And as a kid, it got me in the door. I think I did a movie called Ghoulies 2 a couple of years. I think I was a purple belt at the time, and I had a good spinning sidekick. And I remember in the audition for Charles Band. He was the executive producer of that, and I did that spinning back kick in the audition, and they're like, that's the kid. Let's get like we want him to do the spinning back kick against the zombie dummy." So and then they gave me a shuriken in the movie where I throw the shuriken at the ghoulie. So
We're going to go watch that now.
oh, it's definitely a good B-rated. Take it lightly, my friend. It's definitely not an award. It's
There's no eclipse now, you reckon?
although we still have a lot of fans that swear Ghoulies is like the end all end all. But anyway,
Sometimes you create a cult, you just never know.
no, I've done plenty of those movies that are now very much more famous than they were when they first came out. Um, but yeah, as an actor though, I was able to use a lot of the martial arts and doing, when I did like CSI New York, I had a fight scene, and instead of having a body double, they're like, "You can do it." Yeah, I can do it. So I always enjoyed doing my own fight scenes and stunts. And I give that to the martial arts training. But anyway, so that's how I got started. I found a nearest karate school for me in Irvine was a Kempo school. Back then it was under Fred Villari before they did the split, back in the 80s. Charles Matera was sent out. He was, I guess, one of Fred Villari's number one guys. They sent him out to manage all the West Coast schools and expand the company. Eventually that ended up with a breakup there, and Charles Matera decided that he was going to split from Fred Villari and create United Studios of Self-Defense under the same syllabus, just a different flag, and that caused obviously quite a bit of tension. I was a kid. I watched some of it happen. They were going to each other's dojos, I guess, and breaking into the windows and tearing up the carpets, and it was a big. They called it the Dojo Wars, very dramatic franchise, all based off of, I think, greed. But so that happened. My patch changed over to United Studios patch, I think, when I was around a purple belt. And I stuck with the Shaolin Kempo pretty much all the way through my youth, teenage years. I ended up getting a brown belt, I want to say, when I was around 16 or so. I think I reached that rank. And I was a brown belt though for I think 15 plus years. I stuck to brown. I think I made it to second brown. Um, as a kid, and I didn't test up until I got back from a job that I was working in New York. I think I moved to New York in my early 20s. I was about 22, 23 years old in 1997. And then I moved back after doing One Life to Live out there for 4 years. I moved back in 2002 to California. And that's when I started training again. And I was like, I got to get this black belt. This is ridiculous. So that's kind of where, as a brown belt, I started assistant instructing here in Studio City at their franchise school, and it kind of became a passion organically, where I really found a lot of love and pride in what I was doing, and I started kind of co-managing that school. I helped the school grow in numbers, big time, and I had a shift though, and when once I got my first degree black belt in the Shaolin arts, I started realizing, because I was bouncing at different, working security at different clubs and bars as a doorman, and I was head of security up the street here at a establishment called Skinny's, and I I was pretty familiar with street altercations. I had been in plenty of altercations in my 20s in New York and such, and I learned the hard way fighting sucks. And I did not feel like, as I was maturing in the art of Shaolin Kempo, it was really set as practical as what I wanted. I really wanted to see something that could work in the street, that was more valuable to me, that could evolve with the world. And I think once I kind of tripped into American Kempo, I said, okay, this is close enough, and I could use my classical base that I got received from the Shaolin Kempo training to do what I want to do with my students, and that is create an ever evolving, constantly evolving syllabus that fits to the streets, that can be manipulated, individualized, tailor fitted to each individual body type, from female to male, from small to large to big to small. All of that is very important to me, including our children's programs. So that's what I thought really, once I like I said, tripped into American Kempo. That's what really kind of grabbed me, and I said, okay, this is what I need. And that transition happened back in around 2010. I had pretty much had enough of this Shaolin Kempo world. It was a lot of business politics, a lot of problems with the franchise, and a lot of kind of that pyramid scheme going on that I was very aware of. And they were really trying to get me to start my school under their flag. And I was like, I'm not gonna bite, not gonna fall for this, drink the Kool-Aid. You guys want a lot of money from me. I can do this on my own. And I went ahead and made my decision. I needed to break from acting for a while. It's been 30 something years of my life. I just was burnout, and this was something I was passionate about, and I wanted some stability in my life. Um, so back in 2010, I had a lot of students supporting this idea around me. And so one of them said, let's get you a Kimpo instructor outside of, this company. Because the company had already seen another change. Like they went from United Studios to this Z Ultimate franchise, that's where they lost me. And I said, this is just not for me anymore. So I started calling around, and one of the people I called was Larry Tatum. And Larry Tatum answered the phone. I'll never forget, and talked to me on the phone, very, very nice and open and willing to meet with me. So we set up a time to meet, and he took me on a little, round of American Kempo for 30 minutes to an hour. And I said, this is it. I like this style. It can work with my old style, the classical base that I had from the Shaolin Kempo, which was primarily a blend of Shotokan karate and then Chinese kung fu, uh, pretty much plagiarized from those art systems. It was not really anything unique about it, the way it was being taught. This was Shotokan and then Chinese kung fu. So with Mr. Tatum, he took me under his wing, and eventually I opened my school in June of 2011 with the idea, as you and I were talking before we started the podcast. I had the idea of I would blend my old syllabus with this new American Kempo syllabus until I started looking up at the pages, the syllabus, all these techniques and forms, and I'm like, how am I going to do this? I mean, and I remember Mr. Tatum saying, Donnie, I would recommend you choosing which syllabus you want to teach and stick to it. If you're going to teach American Kempo, stick to American Kempo. Don't try to blend in the Shaolin Kempo at this time because it's going to confuse your students. Um, when I opened my doors in June, about 75% of the school that I was managing came over with me. Thankfully, I was really lucky. And so I started with over 50, almost 60 students the first week I opened. So I was able to pay my rent. And these loyal students really kind of followed my lead in regards to accepting that, look, everything you learned up till some of them were green belts at the time. I don't want you to forget it, but I'm going to start dosing you with this new syllabus. And of course, starting with delayed sword and short form one. And one of the hardest things to break was that half mooning that we had been doing for years and years on end, and the stance changes. And then, of course, once I really started to getting down into the principles of motion and the science behind what Mr. Parker left us, that's when the change really started happening. And of course, a few of my adult students who came over at higher ranks, green and brown, they basically got to a place where they were done. They're like, "I wanna go back to Shaolin. This stuff is too hard." So I lost a few in the interim, but I gained a lot. And so we built up the numbers very quickly here, by using the 24 technique system. Um, and Mr. Tatum was very, very, supportive of me during those years of the first few years of me transitioning over. So that's it. That's kind of my story. I mean, I'm very thankful that I got a good solid foundation from my old school and from that company. I learned a lot of things to do, but a lot of things not to do in regards to business, and also as a martial artist. Like I said, I was kind of over that real classical stage of the arts. I wanted something that could evolve, and I feel like that's what American Kempo's given me. And as you were talking about, Peter, you were talking about how you like to blend other arts. There's gold in everything, and I take Krav Maga, I take Silat, I take Sistema. Just even the few times I've spent on the mats with Martin Wheeler. Just any lessons that I feel can easily blend in, and that's what American Kempo is all about. Mr. Parker talks about it in his books. It's a plug-in. It's something that we can use as a foundation, but then you can delve into other arts, successfully taking what works in those arts and Kempoizing them, if you will, and it actually just evolves what you're teaching. You're not changing it.
Yeah,
It's
correct.
just it's not about changing the techniques, it's about what is working. I could be working on a technique with a 200-pound man and then have a 80-pound girl next to him, and I'm not gonna teach the technique the same. And I think that's my humble opinion, I think that's what happened a lot of times over the years when you hear, "Mr. Parker taught it to me this way," and that's, like, back in Boston. But on the West Coast, he taught it this way in that seminar. Well, it's because he was reading the room. Who's in front
No,
of
yeah,
him? Or what
correct.
was he saying?
I had this conversation many times with Edmund Parker Jr., and as we've been friends for a while, and we have discussions about different things, and two things. One, his father would come in and he'd come to your school, and you would say, "Mr. Parker, how do you do five swords?" And he'd say, "How do you do five swords?" And you would show him. And what he would do was he'd keep it within your envelope of what you're doing, and he'd make sure you're not violating any principles. And then they would go away going, "Well, no, this is how you do five swords because Mr. Parker showed me this is how you do five swords." And all he was doing was correcting you to make sure you're not violating any principles and concepts. The other part of that conversation that we always have, and it comes up a lot, and I've heard this come out of his mouth quite a bit, was my father wished he never called it American Kempo. He wished he called it practical, logical thinking. And this is what I sort of convey when I talk to other styles. Like I got inducted a few years ago, and part of my speech in my seminars to other styles was we have an encyclopedia of Kempo. It should not be called Encyclopedia Kempo. It should be called Encyclopedia Motion Science because it applies to anybody's art. And even the Infinite Insights has a lot of Kempo-centric information, but all the principles, concepts that we do apply to anybody's art. So you can take it and use it in any style. And that's sort of the beauty. I think that he gave us the tools to walk in to any martial arts school and describe what is happening, you know?
Yep. And that the answers that this syllabus gives us changed the trajectory of my success exponentially. I mean, the fact that I could answer a student questioning what I taught and give them a finite science-backed answer due to anatomical alignment or directional harmony or whatever we want to discuss. Those answers were things that were missing in other dojos. Just do it this way. Don't ask questions. Just do it my way. It doesn't work. Do it. Do it anyway. Keep doing it.
Yeah,
But
correct.
that whole
Correct.
science, you mentioned principles of motion, and I think, Peter, that right there is one of the biggest evolutions as me, I've changed a lot since 2011, and I'm continuously my brain is consistently trying to think, "What can I be doing better? What can I do different?" Not changing it, 'cause there's a big debate out there in American Kempo, "That's not the way." That's hogwash to me. That's not the way. What do you mean? That's not what he said. It's never meant to be the way. What I think the most important thing, and I tell this to my students, learn the science, keep the principles of motion in check. Are you canceling width? Are you canceling height? Are you canceling depth? Are you using rotational torque? Are you using directional torque? Are you using counter torque? I mean, all of these things, this is what you need to consider. The Kempo comes through the syllabus. I've even tried to stop myself from calling the written techniques techniques. I like to call them concepts. They're concepts of motion. They're studies of motion. And each one has its own little toolbox set. But the toolbox set is not meant to be five swords in the street. Pieces of five swords will graft into whatever other Kempo takes place, but the principles are what's going to save your ass.
Right.
The principles of motion are
They never had that back in the day, though. It was all
no.
evolving, from when I first learnt it. So Mr. Parker did coin the terminology and give us the tools for all of that.
And I think that's the brilliance of the art, and that's why, when people say, "Oh, Kempo doesn't work," well, it depends on how it's taught, just like anything. I mean, you can teach it solid military style art that's blending Krav Maga and all kinds of combatives, and if it's not taught by the right approach and by the right instructor, it's hogwash. It's useless.
Yeah.
So
It all
all
it all comes back to the practitioner. I keep saying it. Every person is a ambassador for the art of their own art. So if you suck at your art, guess what? Everyone else is going to think that your art sucks. But you look at some people and they say, oh, Wing Chun is the best. And say they're not, as an example, I'm not picking on a style here, but I was using as a reference. They're not that good a practitioner. And you look at it and you go, well, that style's not that good. That's not the style. It's the practitioner that's conveying it and how they, and then you go, okay, well, let's compare it to Bruce Lee. Okay, well, that art looks good now, right? But it all comes down to the practitioner. I kept saying we had this individual when I first joined my instructor's school, and I think he was like an orange belt for 5 years or something like that, right? Like, at talk about Kempo, that was his skill. If someone walked into the dojo, you'd send him over there. He would talk up Kempo like it's no tomorrow. He'd give them all the benefits, the theories, the principles, but when it come to conveying it physically, he was not the guy that you sent there. So I think there's, like they say, horses for courses,
Yeah, it's truth. I mean, I've seen some amazing instructors that I've got a lot of value in seminars, but the way they move, they don't look like Larry Tatum, but their education of the art is amazing. And sometimes it's just because their body is incapable of doing what they did 30 years, 40 years ago, but their brain is still there. I mean, I've learned a ton, and then there's some artists who are some of the greatest movers in the world, and they try to profess it, and it's just like, clear as mud. What what are you trying to what are you trying to get out? You're looking really good, and I wanna move like you, but can you explain it and break it down to
Yeah,
the
not
point
not
where
everyone can, and that's what I found in my journeys too. Was like you have. I don't think I was talking to Chuck Epperson about this, and he was saying um, the episode's coming out next week. He's saying that him and Frank, used to both. He said, "Oh yeah, Huck was my first instructor," but he would say, "Look, Huck, I don't want all this theory shit. It's too hard for me. I just want to do it." But if you look at I mean, anyone that knows Mr. Trejo will know that's a he just wants to get on with it and get it happening. Not to say he didn't know any of the theory, but this is one of the comments that he said to Huck. I don't want all the crap and the hundreds and thousands that go with it. I just want to give me the basics and explain, cut it to the chase. But it doesn't mean they can't be an excellent practitioner either. And it's just the style, right?
Amen. Amen. Well, that leads me to why, like for instance, you were talking about how Graham Elliott, who I love. I mean, once I met him, I'm just like, why haven't I met you before? His seminar was so good. He's such a lovely human being. We still chat online. I tell him, please, I want to get you to down and visit. But I like his way of thinking and his style of just pure character in regards that you said. He's always said, go train, go expand your wings. I've given you this, but there's so much out there. Go and then come back and share it with me, and I will give Mr. Tatum that as well. Like I got to a place where I had been training with Mr. Tatum for a number of years. He had recognized me for the rank that I came to him with, which was a third degree black belt in Shaolin Kempo. After years of training with him, he said, Donnie, I want to recognize you as a third degree so that the community accepts you into American Kempo from the rank that you're wearing. And I had completed the courses, that were needed to get me there. And um, I then, in the interim, started to kind of intermingle. Jorge Cavillo, I love him. He's a friend of mine, and I've learned a lot, even just being on the mats with him. He had a very successful school, NoHo Kempo, up in just up the street, 5 minutes from here. And these guys, I guess he and Scott Higgins and Angelo Collado, I know Mr. Trejo would come over there sometimes. Mr. Tababai would come over. We had a slew of American Kempoists that would train up there on Friday nights. And I guess these guys, while driving back and forth on Lancashire Boulevard here, saw that my grand openings, oh, there's a martial arts school that just opened up and it says Shaolin American. What is that? And in his sign, it kind of looks like Kempo. And they looked in the window. Angelo told me this, Mr. Collado, and he's like, yeah, we saw your Parker picture on the wall. And then we also saw the uh, universal pattern. He said, I went back up to the guys and I said, he's an American Kempo school. Let's figure out who this guy is. Yeah. Because nobody knew me at that point. And so they knocked on the door, gave me a phone call and said, hey, come up and train with us. That was the coolest thing in the world. I give, so much thanks to Angelo for kind of taking me under his wing, not only as a friend, but eventually he became a mentor to me. And to this day, I learned so much from him. He was a big part of why I expanded my friendships within the community of American Kempo. And I'll get into like the travels that we did, and he took me to Europe and stuff. But he introduced me to that crew up there, and they welcomed me, and I was so nervous just to be around them. And because these guys, their style was a little different too. Everybody has that, like you say, they have their own slight approach to American Kempo, and different lineages were training all together up there. That made me go, wait a minute. I want I want this small circle stuff. I want a little bit more of that Mike Pick look, Grandmaster Pick look, Frank Trejo. He moves slightly different than my teacher. And I knew that I needed that at that time to expand my education. I couldn't just stick with the same instructor every week at that point. I had my base, my foundation. I had a pretty clear understanding of American Kempo. I was teaching it full time in my school. I was teaching my instructors how to teach it, the science behind it. So I remember letting Mr. Tatum know through an email. I said, sir, I just wanted you to know. I probably called him as well. I can't remember, but I mean, we talked about it, and I said, um, I think I'm gonna go off and train with some other guys and get some other, approaches and opinions. And he just says, Donnie, you go off and train with whoever you want. He goes, I'll always be here for you. And you can always come back to the nest. And that's our relationship since then. It's always been an open door. That's why he's always going to be, in my opinion, the guy who gifted me with the art. He shared the art with me. He gave me my foundation, and he sparked the love that I have for American Kempo and the respect that I have for the syllabus. But then I get into Angelo Collado, Scott Higgins, Damian Abbott, Paul Dye. I spent a couple of years training pretty consistently with Grandmaster Mike Pick. One of some of the most profound years, of some of the most influential years of my journey back then, was training with Mr. Pick because of the polar opposite way he moved versus the I look at Larry as the dragon. He has the whip and the tail and those long arms and that tall body, whereas Mr. Pick is like Lord of the Rings dwarf, and and he has those blacksmith hands. His circles were smaller. And for me, being my side, I kind of took both lessons, and I still give them credit. Those two gentlemen, I think those two masters kind of molded me into the guy that I am. I like small circles, but there's a time for a big circle occasionally, the whip and so on and so forth. But I have all that within me, and now I move the way I move. But that gives me tools to really bring out the best in each one of my individual students, because everybody's built different. So if you don't have the length of arms and legs that Mr. Tatum does, I'm not going to teach you that style. I'm going to need to teach you something slightly different in regards to how are you going to directionally harmonize, directional torque, or are you going to counter torque? Do you have the ability to counter torque? A lot of time, everybody does, but guys with long arms, that energy travels through the length of that arm, and you get a pretty big wallet. But short arm people, you might need to directionally harmonize, go directional torque. You see what I'm saying? So I got influenced by all these guys. I've had wonderful lessons with Mr. Muhammad, Mr. Tabatabai. I've had wonderful lessons with Doreen DiRienzo, with Norm Sandler. The list goes on and on and on. Rick Jeffcoat has been a big influence on me. Um,
Or is no relation, right? No relation.
no, everybody asks that.
Let's answer that question right there. Like I drilled you on it before, but
Yeah, so no, it's very rare for me to meet another Jeffcoat, especially on the West Coast. You'll find Jeffcoats in the South, like Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and such, and especially the Carolinas. And then in New York, he's from New York, because there was a faction that moved back in the probably late 1800s or whatever. They moved all around. So yes, somewhere along the lines, because he spells it Jeffcoat, we have some form of probably relationship, distant cousins, whatever, distant cousin or whatever. But yes, we are probably related. We never sat down and figured it out, but I've always got along with him and I deeply respect him. And like I said, he's influenced a lot of what I feel is evolution and what I teach and how I teach. So uh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Going back to like influence and different instructors, I eventually started to realize that as a dojo owner, and this is just an opinion, but it's the way I live, instead of choosing one instructor, and I know in American Kempo especially, there's this loyalty thing. What is your lineage? You're disloyal to that lineage. I kind of feel like, in my opinion, that's for some people, and I don't. That's one thing I've learned big time it's just who I am. I don't judge. You do your art. You do you. You teach it how you want to teach it. It's not my job to troll you online and tell you how wrong you are or what have you. That's just not I'm doing it my way. And if you influence me positively, I'm probably going to take lessons from you and borrow some of your approach. Even just some guys my own rank, if we're sharing seminar time together, I learn from them. I mean, anybody that I'm on the mats with, my students, I grow, they teach me, and I think with that, I've learned that I think you and I earlier used the term rogue. In a way, I guess I could be deemed as a rogue, but I try to be friends, and I feel like I've maintained kind of that Switzerland kind of vibe. I just don't want any drama, and of course, it comes through this art, especially as a dojo owner, and I've had to navigate myself through some situations, but in all regard, I just wanna respect everyone for what they do, and I teach my students this as well: "Stay open-minded, if you're in a seminar or you go and visit another school and there's a studio or an instructor, a master who's teaching you something that I didn't share with you or that you are disagreeing with, you don't need to say it. Just absorb the information as is. You don't need to challenge them. Take the lesson, throw away what you want, keep what works for you. And for me, that style I consider myself a student for life. I mean, I'm still learning a lot. The more I'm exposed out there to the different masters, different lineages, different styles, different takes on techniques or concepts or forms, the more I'm gonna grow, and the more I can share and tailor fit it to my student base, to my clients. And then, of course, keeping an open mind of the days of the knife techniques and gun techniques being, digestible, I think are gone. For me, it's like those are things that we need to explore. I teach them something, the classical versions of them for coordination benefits, for little pieces of lessons within motion.
I think if you're doing the knife and gun on an untrained person, which is how the whole like when I asked when Mr. this is what Mr. Dyer told me, and I think I've expanded on it before. He said the system, Mr. Parker told him the system is designed for the untrained person
Against.
against an untrained person. Correct. So if you're doing it against a seasoned professional that handles a gun and knife, they're going to make mincemeat out of you with the techniques unless you start to adjust and alter things.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I think that they're worth exploring, which that's what we do. We explore them, we learn them. Got to learn them anyway. They're in the forums. But we also explore them, and then, of course, I take ideas that I've gotten from Krav Maga and from other practitioners who I've trained with, and we explore as a group. And when I go out there, and especially with my advanced classes, I always tell them, "This is a workshop. I want your voices. I want you guys to speak out when something doesn't feel right. I want you to discuss this openly with me included. Let's all openly discuss these techniques and these concepts and try to figure out what works and what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. This is how we grow. We're not changing it. We're exploring it from its core and then figuring it out, and putting the puzzle pieces together to form something that could potentially help evolve what may have looked really cool back in the 70s and 80s. In today's world, with online chatter and YouTube and all the different videos and everything, your students are exposed whether you like it or not. Back in the day, it was easy to close the doors of the dojo and just tell them, don't go to other dojos. they'll hurt you or whatever the spiel was, and I've heard that in a lot of times, especially with the franchises. They were like, don't ever train with Ed Parker guys. They're going to hurt you. They hit too hard. Now I look back and I go, yeah. And that's the good thing, my friends. I wish you guys would have hit us that hard. That's part of the damn game,
Conditioning. It's called
you
conditioning.
know. Yes, but anyway, we were able to control that. Now, you can't control that. Your students are gonna expose, so you better be prepped, and you better have a system specifically for your adult program that is evolving and making them feel like they're gaining a knowledge that's going to help them, especially if you call yourself a self-defense school. You better be exploring the true art of combat arts, self-defense, in a practical way. And I'm a huge fan of classical. I tell my students, you're gonna learn the star blocking set. You're gonna learn the old classical Japanese hard blocks. You're gonna learn how to parry. You're gonna learn the Chinese arts and the speed and the circular motion. You have to. You have to have a good horse stance. You have to have your base. You have to have good solid classical kicks in order to throw a kempo kick from ground up. All of that is important. The foundation of this are ABCs. But then when we start to break the bow and drop into the knee, and we start to move a little more wildly and more organically, with that foundation, you should be stronger. You should have a more success in evolving. So, but I don't think I'd have this mindset if I originally got under a master who said, "Don't go there. You can only learn from me in my lineage, and you don't want to mix it up anywhere," because that was not who Mr. Tatum was. Um, and once I created my group of friends in American Kempo, such as the Coyatos and William Glenn and Damian Abbott and uh, you know t- uh, Tim Hartman. He's not even American Kempoist, but I've expanded my David Pantano, Dan Meck and Sabora Chan, all those guys. All of them have had influences on me positively, and some way or another, all of the exposure that I've had and I've really loved to have been able to experience. That's really my Kempo. I probably am just like one big giant, um, like multi ingredient stew. It's like I'm a melting pot of information, and I like it like that. You know, I always respect the guys that this is the way Trejo taught it. I'm part of the Trejo lineage. I have a lot of respect for that. The way I was brought up with the kind of speckled, you know, stuff that I did as a kid with Shaolin Kempo and all the breaks in the company, and then I even trained in Taekwondo, and in New York I couldn't find a Kempo school out there back in the 90s, so I was training with this old Chinese practitioner down in Chinatown in his basement. He didn't speak English. I just followed his direction, his physical direction. All that exposure is why I can't necessarily tell you I am part of this lineage. My lineage is just, I would say, generalized. It's the martial arts. I've had a
I think
martial lineage.
we were talking about that before. Mr. Wedlake um, puts a lot of emphasis on it, and lineage is your pedigree. So if you're looking, I think it's probably not a good analogy, but if you're looking to buy a dog and you want a purebred, then you look for the pedigree and a certificate. If you're looking for a crossbreed because you want you want the crossbreed and the different changes and strengths that get all blended together, then um, the pedigree isn't that important anymore, apart from the actual individual animal you're looking for, and then what the traits of the animal are. It's probably how to put it the best. And then we talk about loyalty, so it all sort of comes together. So lineage is pedigree, loyalty is two-way street, but then you have loyalists that are loyal to their instructor. And I keep saying this, for forever, it's always been this way. Your instructor has had a falling out with someone, and you are now taking that plight and that fight with you, even though you've never met that individual. You haven't seen him, you haven't met him, and your interaction could be totally different. Like my students ask me, like everyone's students ask, it's not me, everyone's students ask their instructor, I saw this guy on YouTube or on Facebook or on wherever, or I've heard of this guy. Who is this guy? Do you know them? And a lot of them will go by what their instructor says. And he'll say, yeah, I know that guy. He's an a-hole, or you don't want to go train there. He doesn't know anything, so instead of finding out for themselves, I had one of my students ask me about an individual and, I said, look, I'm not a fan. I don't think I'll ever be a fan, but that doesn't need to be your experience. You need to go and meet and see, and you might have a great experience. My journey might have been, I'm not going to have a good experience, but you might have a totally different experience on that. So
True statement. But I mean, what happens between others if you haven't crossed my line and you both are both very close friends of mine or people I respect, I'm not gonna unless you cross my line or you've really done something to one another that I completely disagree with. That's another story. But if you guys have a problem, that's your problem, and that goes for lineages as well. I mix it up with anybody who's willing to mix it up with me. I have no problem getting out of the mats with people. I have no problem showing up at seminars, not as a guest instructor even, but as a student coming in with an open mind. That's how I grow. It's how I meet new people. I tell my students the same. Go out there. I'm not going to tell an orange belt, hey, yeah, go and train in Wing Chun Kung Fu. And when they ask me, "Hey, can I train with this guy in the park?" I'm like, "You can. I'm not your father. I'm not gonna tell you what to do. I'm gonna tell you, though, that you're gonna frustrate that instructor in that art, and you're gonna come back here and frustrate us in American Kempo because at your rank, it's not time to cross train." And I've had plenty of students not listen to me,
yeah,
and
correct.
they always regret it because their Kempo struggles because 'cause they're being taught di
There's a difference between visiting for seminars to cross pollinate and cross training. And I think the advice I've had from every single guest, and we've got 100 episodes, so we've had probably 50 guests. Or no, I think we're up to your number 66. Every guest has said, get a foundation in your base art, get your black belt first, and then look to cross train. But you can travel to do seminars and gather ideas and look at concepts. But it's hard enough if you're not picking up one art, it's very hard to grasp two arts, you know.
It's a lot easier when you have a good foundation in one art to then not only have your body and mind differentiate between our two styles, but also foundations. It's like ABCs. And one thing I think you'd agree on is most traditional styles or syllabus driven styles pretty much start from a horse stance, and they all have the basic ABCs.
Except for BJJ.
ABCD, you know what I'm saying? What's that?
Except for BJJ.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story. Whole nother story, which again, that's another art that I have a deep amount of respect for, and I've one thing I'll give the Shaolin Kempo world that I'm very thankful for in the days that I was training underneath that flag, that we fought a lot. The syllabus had a lot of holes, not a very practical syllabus, but the forms were amazing. They're beautiful, but we fought, and they made us fight a lot, and we fought on the ground a lot. We did a lot of takedowns. We went to the ground. We learned how to fight on our feet and roll. I'm really thankful for that. I share that as well with my students. When it's time for tournament, we do the point sparring. We'll do a little point sparring for drills, for timing, so on and so forth. But most of the time here, we continuous spar. I want my students to be able to get hit and continue fighting. I want my students to work out that awkward, real ugly, not pretty stuff, but that really ugly street style fighting. We go out in the back parking lot at night, get up against the walls, press on each other. It's all of that pressure cooking that I enjoy doing in regards to the art of fighting. Ring fighting, tournament fighting, it's a different skill set. Can they all blend together? The skills? Yes, absolutely. But I feel like you need to separate and differentiate between them before they're all those skills are able to be brought together. And so, yeah, I mean, with ground, I've taken Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. In fact, Steve Baca, who runs the NoHo MMA now, he ran a Kempo school for years, well, I think 15 years, he said. Fifth degree, I think he made up fifth or sixth. But he transitioned completely over to MMA and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. he was a guest instructor here for a while. He had a little BJJ class going on every week for a while he was starting up his school up in North Hollywood. And I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot from wrestling, and I don't know the BJJ syllabus, but I do find it important to explore. But I always tell my students, my job, in my humble opinion, and my approach is I want to keep you on your feet. I want to teach you how not to get taken down. I want to give you a chance to stay up on your feet. And if you do get taken down, I don't want you to stay down there on the concrete where you're exposed to multiple attackers and kicking you and kicking your head and such. I want you to be able to try to work your way back up on your feet. And this is a stand-up art, and no one can, I know there's been practitioners and masters who have blended in BJJ. I have a lot of respect for that. It's not what we do here, but we do. I'll work five swords or shielding hammer up to someone parrying or botting and weaving underneath and shooting the legs, and then I teach my students to sprawl. We do drills like that to keep you up on your feet, and if you go down to the ground, we give you the dirty stuff to do, trying to get back up, do what you need to, and see how you can recover. So, that's stuff that we do explore here, but, with the BJJ, it's taken over where everybody yeah, it's like there's one on every block where I live. I mean, they're everywhere here, everywhere. And I have students who go and they roll. I've had students that train and cross train in BJJ. I said, just do it. Go, do what you want. If you want to roll around with sweaty dudes, that's fine. I'm not I'm not into swapping sweat that much every night. We do it enough in American Kempo. Hands get slimy, but I have a lot of respect for it, and I do think it's important. I think it's important to be able to cover that base and make sure that you cover that education. But our focus is stand up, and that's the art that we chose.
Tell us a little bit about your black belt grading. So if I look at your journey, um, started in 1985 with so you were 7, was it 7? 9 years old, 1985, Fred Villari under Charles Matera Studio. Um, got to so you got to your 3rd degree in that system?
I did, yeah. I tested for my first. I used to have the certificate. I just redid my office, but I think it was 2006 or 7. I got my first degree black belt.
Okay. Tell us about your grading. Tell us about that
I,
grading.
I'll give you. It's interesting. I have a couple of students. One being my number one guy here, Jared Podos. He manages my school for me. He's a 4th degree under me, and he's been probably alongside a few others the most loyal student and slash, of course, brother friend that I've accumulated over
So
the
here's your
years.
loyalist.
He's true. But also, remember, he's also under me. So these guys, they go out and they mix it up with people. And that's why I have so many guests here. If you're a friend of mine and you're in town and you want to share some stuff, get up there and do it. I'll take the class. We learn from that, and that's how we expand our relationships, and we keep the community that some people think is so broken in American Kempo. I believe that it's really not in my community. We have such tight friendships and circles, and I love being friends with multiple different lineages and stuff. So, yeah, no, Jared's a loyalist, but he also drank the Kool-Aid from me in regards to just, like, open your mind and keep it open. He's trained with them all. But Jared, you know he followed me over here, and he'll say the same thing about the tests. Our tests in American Kempo, I find, are very different from what I grew up with. The black belt test for me lasted about, I want to say, at least more closer to, I think, 6 to 8 hours. It started at 8 a.m. and I drove home at about 4 or 5 p.m. that day. It was a Saturday. And they were known for hazing. It was a hazing style experience. Um, Actually, back when I was an instructor over there, we had a lot of complaints from our underbelts clients, especially adults, and especially older adults who went to these headquarter tests, which eventually the company started forcing us to. They wouldn't allow us to test in house, which I totally disagreed with, because these were our students, not the companies. But they started forcing us to do these company tests at different headquarters in the region. and our students would come back and complain because it was like a fraternal hazing. It's like one of my students, actually, never forget, Barry. He's a doctor, grown man, came back and he says, "Hey, Sensei, I just want you to know that I respect you guys here at this dojo. You know I love you, but don't ever send me to that headquarters test again, because I left college years ago and I'm a doctor now. I'm a grown man with a family, and I left my fraternity back in those days. And these guys were forced to sing songs and crawl on the ground in a garage, in a parking garage. I mean, stupid things. Nothing to do with martial arts, all to do with
What kind of
psychology.
grading is that? Sure you sent them to the right place?
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of where this is, that just,
They did get the address wrong or something.
I'll tell you this, that goes back to one
Sent
of
them to the
the,
Kool-Aid shops.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Talk about the old McDojo. That's why I left. And that's where it was going. That was the direction of the company. And I'm openly saying that on a podcast because I have respect for my training, and I have a lot of respect for a lot of the practitioners that are still in that, so that you're doing that syllabus and in that world. There's some wonderful martial artists and amazing fighters in there, but it was not for me. And I think anyone that's open to reality would agree with me that there's a lot of crap going on in these franchises, and especially within that particular circle. So, long story short, my black belt test, it was a day to remember. We had to do all of our techniques right hand, right sided against a right punch, and then the lefts. We as a black belt, you had to switch it over against the left punch and do the left hand version. Um, so we did all that. We did all of our forms. We had katas 1 through 6, pinions 1 through 5. You talk about workouts. I mean, we ran miles that day. It was hot. It was it was right at the end of spring, early summer when I tested. So it was all outside. There was probably 60 to 100 students testing that day. It was giant. You did not have a board sitting in front of you watching you. You did this in groups, and it was a group activity where you had a lot of speckled masters. So you always had eyes on you, but they were all standing around watching and kind of just walking around, watching the different groups and stuff. But it was military style, hard black belt test. At the end of the day, the last hour or so, you went inside. Grandmaster Matera sat and ran the sparring, and basically he and the higher ranks of the company, we fought with, I think, I don't even think they have had MMA gloves on us at that time. I think it was bare knuckle, full contact fighting. And people, I mean, I had a black eye when I left that test, bloody lip. One of the kids had to get carried out while he was meditating because he just was so dehydrated from the day. His whole body cramped up. It was physically and psychologically one of the most challenging things I've ever done in regards to testing. I'll never forget it, and I'm thankful for it. It's not the way I would do it anymore. It's not the way I test my black belts. I test them, on a board. It's very balanced in physical, mental, and spiritual, training, especially the mental and the physical. I have them write their syllabus. They have to answer certain questions about the science and the principles of motion that we've been discussing. So I think that is a test that the student feels eyes are on me. I have no room. Like in those big group tests that I was exposed to back then, you didn't have to be. That's why they had so many people go up to black belt, like you and I were talking earlier prior to the starting the recording. There's plenty. Is like there's some really poor martial artists out there that are wearing black belts. So of course, that's not rocket science. The problem with that kind of testing is you pushed probably 90% of those first degree black belts that were promoted that day should never have been promoted to black belt. And I know that's a strong thing. I might be off on my statistic there, but I'm telling you that it was a small crew of us that were really athletic and had their what it really what I feel
I
like.
think it's a little bit subjective too, though, right? Because the I always keep saying the grading is just a pressure test. Your instructor's already tested you to that rank. If they're putting you forwards for the grading rather than you putting yourself forward, that's a different story. I've had that where I've had someone put themselves forwards, telling me they're ready, and they just weren't, right? So we continue to have that conversation. I think they're like that river in Egypt. They're in denial. Um, um, you know, but it all comes down to instructor. No,
Absolutely, and I felt that day when I wrapped that black belt around my waist, I to this day, I swear by it, I felt like I was a first degree black belt. I have no questions but I'm not gonna say that was for everybody, the 60 to 100 people that they were making $500 a pop off of, or however much. I think it was close to that, if not that. Somebody was making a lot of money. But the point being is the way you group tests like that, I I changed very quickly when I started my company. And of course, American Kempo, um, the style itself, that's not the way they test. Not at least I think majority of American Kempos, they all do but my tests are still horribly challenging physically. You will not leave here dry. Likely, especially in the upper ranks, sometimes blood is spilled. Sometimes lips are popped and noses are popped and even orbital sockets have been fractured. And it's not something that we pride ourselves on, but accidents happen. It's a tough test. And you're going to prove, regardless of your coordination ability, because as a martial arts instructor yourself, not everybody who walks through the doors come with a left foot and a right foot. A lot of times you end up with two left feet, and your job as a martial arts instructor is to do the best you can with what's in front of you, the canvas in front of you. And so I get some people out there that I have to creatively figure out. You've been a student for 10 years, 9 years. You have to get somewhere. I can't keep you at brown belt. We've got to push you forward. How do I unlock the best in you, showing me that if God forbid something happened on the street, you'd be able to handle it, at least have a higher chance than the average bear to handle it. That's where I look at, you know, testing up, and you have some people who are just going out there and they're blasting it and they're looking exactly like the book. But that's not everybody, so
yeah.
anyway, I think the way we do it here is very, as far as American Kempo, sitting on a board, taking individuals up one at a time, two at a time. Of course, you do a group session, but then you individually test them. It means a lot more to the student as well. The memory is really, I think, digested and stuck to the soul. Whereas I will say that being tested alongside 60 plus people, if I wasn't an instructor at that time, I would not have had the eyes on me like I did. Those of us who were testing that day, who had already been assistant instructing, they were really pushing us and they were watching us like hawks. Whereas the average client, just the everyday consumer, they were up there testing and it was like, they're going to pass because they just paid you $500. You're not going to fail them. Not unless they're just going to freeze. Two kids, right? One adult and one kid that day, I do remember, got sent home just because they gave up. They couldn't handle the heat. They couldn't handle the pressure. They couldn't handle the physical challenge. There's nothing you can do there. But if they were to stick around, even if they didn't know all their techniques and their forms, that day I can promise you they would have passed. So anyway, that was my first degree. That was and then the second degree, same thing, big test.
So
Uh,
what was your hardest grading and why?
I would say physically first. Um, One of the more challenging gradings and more fun gradings was my fifth. I did that over at Scott Gonzalez's, and Mr. Gonzalez hosted us. Me and Anthony Angulo actually tested with some of his students at his school. He hosted it with blessings of some of our instructors, and that was a lot of fun. It was kind of nice at that rank. You just go up there and you just do what you do, and it's a nice challenge. It's just like I feel like testing for you may agree or disagree, but I feel like testing in these days for me is I test myself when I go and travel to places that no one knows me as a guest instructor at an event. I go up there in front of people who they have no loyalty to me. They know nothing other than maybe what they've caught online on YouTube or whatever.
Because like there's a guy from Ghoulies too.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's, you're being judged, and you're not only being judged by the students, but by your fellow masters with you, alongside you. Sometimes there's grandmasters watching you, and you have to go up there and present something that is top notch. And if you don't, you are being judged for it. And I think that's a wonderful way of, I always tell my students, that's why I like to teach abroad. That's why I like to be part of the seminar circuit, is because it's a personal kind of tournament for myself, where I go up there and I put myself out there, and then I come back not only stronger, but with a ton of information, because I've also taken seminars during that time and learned from other instructors. And the feedback from students who are not with you every week, I think, is super valuable. What you can pull off in your school, and all of a sudden you go abroad and you have 50, 60 students out there over the weekend training, and you're trying something that you swore worked last week on Wednesday night's class, and they're still kind of going, that's, we don't know how to move like that, or whatever. We don't agree with you. Whatever it is, that's a really cool thing for me, experience wise.
Yeah, great.
So,
Great.
yeah.
I'm your host, Peter Taz, and you've tuned in to the Mind Sensei podcast from Down Under. We want to take a moment to thank all our listeners for tuning in to the Mind Sensei podcast. We appreciate your support and hope our show has been both informative and entertaining for you. If you haven't already done so, we would like to invite you to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. Finally, we'd like to thank our guests for sharing their knowledge and experience with us. Without their generosity, this podcast would not be possible. Thank you again for listening to the Mind Sensei podcast Down Under. We hope that you continue to join us on this journey through the world of martial arts.